Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons and how Dungeons and Dragons lifts up the dungeon master as the new writer. Okay, so I'm a writer, and actually, you're on this channel. You have probably heard me say thousands. You probably heard me say 100,000 words easily, right? But the reality is, I have written two books, each that are 100,000 words long, and you have never seen either one of them. You don't know the title of them. You don't know nothing about them, right? And the reality is, and so the thing is, I am a writer. I've been a writer since I think I've been actually, I think I have been a writer since I was 6 years old, right? When starting at when I was 6 years old, first grade, I was on a school bus, right? Going to public school. And at that point, I started writing. Now, what did I do initially was I would read books. I read a lot of books on, it was definitely a thing. And I kind of got made fun of for it, but I would read books on the school bus. And this would upset people, but I loved books, and my parents, God bless them, they would take me to the library and I would bring back literally bags of books, right? And I just whipped through them, and I absolutely loved books. And so basically I came home one day and I started telling my mom a story about one of the books I'd read. And I remember getting very upset and starting to cry, right? And she's like, "Why are you crying?" I was like, "Well, I can't remember the names of these characters in these stories, so I can't tell you the story." And she's like, "It's okay. Just tell me about the characters, what type they were." And I was like, "No, no, no. I went to bed and I was like really upset. And the next day, my mom had, just gave me a little bit of a little tiny notebook, right? And she's like, "Put this in your backpack, and when you're reading the stories, write down the names of the characters, and then you could tell them to me, right?" And so I did, and I started writing then, right? I was just writing down the names of the characters in the books, right? And it was really transformative for me, and I think that's when I really began to write, and I never stopped writing. And I wrote two novels. Both of those novels failed utterly, right? Now, I believe I'm good at writing novels. And I believe that the two novels I wrote are good. And by the way, you can find them if you just go on the link below. You'll find the site to my Scott Garibay site, and both novels are there, right? But the reality is, what I found was that the novel is dying, right? And the other thing I think was really interesting was I I got very frustrated with writing novels because I could write the novels, but I couldn't distribute them. I didn't have a global platform to distribute my novels, right? I do have a global platform to distribute my writing today. And so what you're looking at, my channel, I have over 6,000 videos I have written, okay? And you're like, "Wait, D. Scott, did you write?" I write a ton. So my mother gave me a notebook when I was in first grade. Today, I still keep a notebook on me all the time, and I write down my ideas. And every single video you have ever seen has come from a written line, right? Now, I write it and and then I think about it, and I extemporaneously create content based on writing. I am a writer, right? And the reality is, this is important, and this is engaging, and this is powerful. And I'm so thankful to YouTube for saying, "Listen, if I want to get my novel out, ain't nobody going to see it." And the reason why is there isn't a good, powerful, free platform for that, right? Whereas there definitely is a good, powerful, free platform that is global, that is immediate, and that is useful, and that is right here on YouTube, right? But what YouTube has created is actually less powerful than what Dungeons and Dragons has created. And what I want to talk to you about today is you as a writer. So if you are a dungeon master, you are a writer. You don't think of yourself and the work you're doing for Dungeons and Dragons as a writer, right? But that is the best way to think about it. It really, and get this, what you're doing is far more powerful than a published author. Far more powerful, right? And the reason why is, one, literally hundreds of thousands of books are written every year, right? Vast majority of them get read by 100 to 500 people. They're immediately forgotten. they do not have any impact on the culture, and they really don't have any impact on people, right? But Dungeons and Dragons is not the case, right? So one, the writing you're doing as a dungeon master. First of all, you are writing every single week. By the way, if you don't put pencil to paper, you are not a dungeon master. Uh, I'll say that right now, right? And you're like, wait a second, Scott, what about the stuff I do on a computer? You suck. Get good. Write your stuff on paper, right? Now, this is a whole thing. People say this better on the internet, and I 100% believe this, right? You can absolutely use a computer as a tool to organize your thoughts, but when your first thought arrives in your brain, it needs to go on paper. And the reason why is when you go to pick up paper, it will never interrupt you. Every computer you have, every phone you have, every electronic device is rigged to interrupt you constantly. No real writer writes with a computer. You write on paper. You can absolutely craft your story. You can magnify your initial, pen to paper writing. You can absolutely magnify it with a computer. I do that too. But if your ideas do not exist on paper somewhere, you are not a writer. You suck. You are not a good dungeon master. Period. End of sentence. Right? You can fix it. It only costs $1 to fix it. Like, and actually, you don't even have to pay $1. It's free. It's free. Like, go to any church. There'll be a notepad there, and you can take their pen. Right? Like, every good church has free pens and paper. Right? Like, so it's free to fix it. Right? This is not a wealth issue, but this is important, and I need you to understand this. Right? So you have your pen and a pad, man. Eminem put it down. Literally put it down. Right? You start with a pen and a pad, and if you don't, change it because you are doing it wrong. Okay. And by the way, I've always been a pen and paper guy, but recently I watched a video probably about 5 years ago, and they're like, listen, you have to carry a notebook on you in your pocket. It could be super cheap and it can be a pen, but you have to, because every time you go for your phone, you will be interrupted and you will lose that idea, or it will change. And it was 100% correct. Pen and paper. It is hot, or you're not writing. You are not writing. You are not a writer. You are not a dungeon master. If you're not capturing ideas on pen and paper, you're something that's close. You're a mimic, right? Okay. All right. Let's keep going here. All right. The writing you're doing on Dungeons and Dragons is truly transformative. The author writes a book and hands it to everyone, right? The dungeon master writes what is needed for one session, right? Takes 10 ideas to that session, and 70% of them are on the cutting room floor at the end. Only 3 ideas out of the 10 make it, right? So, and this is why the dungeon master is so much more powerful and so much more valuable than the author, right? The vast majority of their stuff saves, right? But we literally, the dungeon master literally sacrifices their ideas so that the audience can impact the story, right? And they share narrative control with the players. Gary, I cannot stress this enough. Gary Gygax did not create a game. He built an identity engine, and he built a platform for sacrifice, right? He built a way for the dungeon master to collaboratively create worlds. And what he did really set a new paradigm for sacrifice in the secular world. Christians have always been doing this. We've been sacrificing for people for many, many years. What Gary did is really incredible. He allowed, and that's the point. The dungeon master really creates 10 ideas, and 7 of them, knowing 7 of them will be sacrificed. And by the way, there are a lot of dungeon masters who don't sacrifice ideas, and then railroad, they don't do the sacrifice. They don't really qualify as dungeon masters. They're selfish masters, right? We do have a few in Dungeons and Dragons. It happens, right? But that's why my channel is here, to stop that, right? So the reality is, you are a writer, and not only are we the new writer of the new world, what we do is valuable and powerful, extremely valuable, extremely powerful, right? And personal. The stories that we create are more personal than any author has ever been able to even remotely remotely match, right? We have stories that are carried from college to, you know, like I have stories. I ran them in high school, right? There are people, there's a person in Hong Kong today who tells people about the stories that I created with him in the mid 80s, right? Your stories will be told to girlfriends and wives, husbands and boyfriends, children, grandchildren, pets, right? What we do matters. It is incredibly personal. It is not dross created by some author for thousands of people to read. It is hyper personal, hyper crafted, hyper responsive. We are the new writer for the new world. And what we do is 100 times more powerful than any author can ever even remotely match. And we have this privilege because Gary Gygax set a new paradigm for human secular sacrifice. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.